Greetings, parish orphans and retrogrades. Timothy Gordon here with a special treat for you today. Mr. Edward Pentin, one of my longtime favorites, National Catholic Register, and EWTN. Mr. Pentin, welcome today. You need no lengthy introduction. Hope you're well.
It's kind of you, Tim. Good to meet you at last and be on the program.
You too. Yeah, the strange thing about doing what we do is that you meet lots of friends, as it were, that you talk to on DM or text message or on Skype, telephone or something without actually meeting face to face. So, hey, you know what I've said before and I'll say it again, like the lost years of Obi-Wan Kenobi in form and matter, in body and spirit, Mr. Edward Pentin.
You're too kind. I don't think I've bet that. Yes.
No, I mean, his mien, his approach, his equanimity, and a little bit the looks as well. I said kind of episode 3.5, Obi-Wan Kenobi himself on Catholic Reportage. No, it's I've watched you for a long time, man, and I know that my viewers are all people that admire you and Raymond, and it's really an honor to talk to you. And now that you have this book out, The Next Pope,
yeah,
people are probably asking you, for starters, what do you know about the end of this pontificate, which you don't know anything necessarily.
I don't. No, and this book is not really about this pontificate. It is all about the next one, and it was written really to get to allow the cardinals to have the full breadth of who they could be voting for and all the details at hand so that they can make an informed decision. Obviously, we've got 19 candidates. That's a rather small percentage of the full College of Cardinals, but we hope that it will provide that necessary information for them and give them what they need to make, as I say, a good informed decision, because that has been the problem in the past, that they haven't had the details, they haven't had the information. So this really aims to fill that gap.
Yeah, I'd like to move with you chronologically, and as Tolkien writes, the best place to begin is precisely at the beginning. So this pontificate really begins at the end of the last one, because we're talking about the end of Francis's pontificate. Can I start with a couple things you say about the late pontificate of Benedict XVI? You say the joke around the Vatican is that the Pope isn't sick until he's dead. Mm. Well, starting in proper etiology, proper beginning, I would say a Pope won't and cannot die until he at least falls sick, or even a Pope cannot get sick until he gets sick. And Benedict XVI, who retired under unique circumstances, let's say, wasn't sick the first 7 years after his pontificate. It's 7.5, 8 years later, and he is only now showing signs of slowing down. Is this ipso facto proof that we didn't get the whole story with regard to his abdication?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think at the time he certainly felt very weak. And if you see the pictures of him at the time of his resignation, he did look very frail and really quite sick. And I think he felt he only had a few months or years left. And then, of course, once he'd retired, I think he managed to get back his energy and actually sort of recovered from that. And so I think he I think he genuinely thought it was the right thing to do, and that he felt he could not continue physically to do it, as he said. And so that's why he resigned. And now, of course, he really is getting frail again. But as we heard yesterday, he's getting better from that recent sickness. So he seems to be doing all right at the moment.
Good Teutonic immune system, evidently. Yeah. You quote in the book that perhaps this was your article. It was either chapter 1 or your article on the book. Pope Francis said something to the effect of, another Peter will return to Abu Dhabi after leaving Abu Dhabi sometime last year, and that the abdication of Benedict XVI could well become an institution, something that we expect maybe more than a leitmotif. If so, would that be smoking gun evidence that Benedict XVI's justification was secondary.
You mean that he was intending to create this sort of institution primarily of a,
kind of serial abdication from henceforth.
I think that was part of it as well. I think his because he wrote about this whole issue of a Pope Emeritus, or at least he sort of touched on it back in I think it was in the 1960s. I mean, he's had this view for a long time of a Pope resigning, and I think part of him, and I think part of his sort of intellectual makeup, and perhaps being a German theologian also plays into this, that he felt he could sort of be a sort of trailblazer for sort of resigning popes, and I think he wanted to do that and sort of set the example and become the first pope for. Well, no pope has really resigned in the way that he has, and so I think he wanted to sort of lead the way on that. So yeah, I think that was part of it. But I don't know how much that. I mean, he didn't obviously mention that in his resignation speech, and he hasn't said that openly that that's what he was planning to do. But that certainly is what has happened, and that has been the consequence of his resignation. Yeah.
So 19 possible papabile, and you say you expect a less progressive next pope. In some. I hope you're right. What does that mean about the two that I take to be papalissimi, Peter Cardinal Turkson and Cardinal Tagle? What does that mean about their chances? Because aren't they both quite progressive? Would that mean that they're less papabile than everyone has been assuming thus far?
Well, I mean, I don't really want to get into my sort of guesswork, because it's anyone's guess, really.
Sure.
It's a bit of a parlor game, and it's as somebody said, it's a bit like throwing darts at a dartboard. You have no real idea of the likelihood of anyone really being elected. But I think my sense, though, from what I hear here, and the fact that people have been concerned about the direction of the pontificate and the turmoil that there's been during this pontificate, I think there is a sense among many in the college that they want for the papacy to sort of swing back to a more conservative pope and somebody more a safer pair of hands, and someone more perhaps diplomatic and a sort of quieter pope, not so revolutionary. And I think that tends to be the case. As I said before, the old Roman saying, "A fat pope follows a thin one," means that a progressive pope will tend to follow a conservative one, and vice versa. And that's what I think we'll have here. So that's my guess. But of course, as I say, it's anyone's guess. And but that is based on some things that I've heard from here, I would say.
Yeah, it's interesting, the supercilious nature of the voter, whether we're talking about 100 some odd voters or 200 million. The ballot box tends to be overreactionary, doesn't it? It's funny as we come up to the American election, which is certainly slated for this year. Yes,
I mean, it's not so similar to. I mean, there are similarities to the political arena, but I don't know if it plays out exactly the same. And of course, the way that Pope Francis has made up the college with his appointments does, of course, impact that too. Though a lot of them do come from the global south, and so they tend to be more conservative, and I think that also pushes it more in a more conservative direction for the next conclave. Yeah.
Certainly. So we know that at the last two conclaves, there were members from this now reputed St. Gallen Mafia, and in each case where Bergoglio ranked second in the voting when Pope Benedict XVI was eventually elected, and then obviously he ranked first in the conclave, which elected him. The St. Gallen Mafia proved determinative in both of those conclaves. Could I don't know how you want to look at it, the consistories that Francis has used to elect so many of his personal choices, could that carry forward the work of the St. Gallen Mafia in the next conclave?
I don't know if it will directly, but I think they could be susceptible to influence from people in that sort of group who will want to push the conclave in a direction towards Francis and his direction and his vision for the papacy and the church. And I think that could happen. But I don't see a sort of St. Gallen group, at least obviously it's hard to sell because they tend to be secret, but I don't know. But I don't know if they're going to try that again. Maybe they will. Certainly there's always a bit of lobbying that goes on outside the conclave, and that's on both sides. I mean, it wasn't just the St. Gallen group. There were also people who were keen to get Benedict elected, and of course fought off the St. Gallen mafia in 2005, and successfully, and that was because they sort of formed a group to do that. So yeah, there will be those groups probably, but it's anyone's guess how effective they'll be in the next conclave. Yeah.
Speaking of which, I believe it's footnote number 1 in your book states that Pope Francis has opted against preconsistory meetings. Is this, or could it be, a reaction to same the St. Gallen Mafia, the publication and wide notoriety of the St. Gallen Mafia?
Well, it could be. I mean, that's a positive way to look at it. That the Pope is trying to stop those sort of groups from developing, and that could well be. I think, though, it's more likely because of the timing when he stopped those, which was after the Dubia. There was a wide sense that he didn't want those meetings because he didn't want to be confronted with any sort of criticism for the Dubia and for the Amoris Laetitia at the time. And so whether that's true, I don't know, but the timing does seem to coincide with that, and that he stopped those meetings there. Now, somebody said it was Cardinal Brandmüller was getting all ready to confront him at one of those consistory meetings, and that's why it was cancelled. But I don't know if that's true, but certainly it could be. It could be true, yeah. Yeah,
that's what I think too. The greater part of the skeptic anyway. What does that mean exactly, to get ready to confront someone verbal? I mean, all you do is just like, what are you warming up your voice or what? All you do is, hey man, hey Holy Father, can I address you on a point in a posture of filial piety? You have to say all the extra stuff, but I wonder what that means. He's puffing out his chest or lifting weights. He's getting his bench up. What do you do as a cardinal to address the Holy Father with, the claims as hotly disputed as those between 2016 and 2018?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know, but the thing about Pope Francis does seem to be that because he is not an expert theologian, he does feel vulnerable at being confronted with obviously someone of great knowledge and scholarly background as Cardinal Brandmüller, and so it's certainly a vulnerable position that he feels he's in, and he tends to avoid those sort of situations, I think.
Yes, when you're in a vulnerable position, anytime you're treating of a topic where you pledge not to speak one word, if anyone is asking for a word or more, it puts you into a position of automatic vulnerability. Speaking of which, what will we ever, in your opinion, see one corpuscle, one letter, one jot, one tittle of the McCarrick report? I guess it depends on the next pope.
Well, there are rumors that it could be coming out the end of the month. I don't think those are perhaps very well founded, but there's certainly rumors that could happen. I don't know. I mean, there's all sorts of theories, and nobody really knows how far they've got or whether there's any real likelihood of it coming out. But I think there's going to be consistent pressure. I don't think the faithful are going to give up on this, and I think the Vatican is going to have to respond in some way in the next few months to tell us, what's happened to the report and what they're going to be doing about it. I think it will come eventually, but who knows how thorough it's going to be and how really it's going to reveal what really went on with McCarrick.
I mean, look, here's my approach, and I know, we've spoken a lot offline, but I view the number one most important event in the last decade, easily, in the Catholic world anyway, maybe the world, is Benedict's abdication. And number two, that crowns all the Francis stuff, all the wackiness and irregularities and disconformities with regard to the pontificate, which followed Benedict XVI's abdication. I think the abdication itself is it. And I think it's like the purloined letter, Edgar Allan Poe's purloined letter. It just hides right there on the mantle. It's still conspicuous to me. I think that's most important Catholic tidbit of news in a decade. And I think number two is a similar purloined letter that just hides there on the mantle in plain sight, is all the McCarrick stuff and Francis's election, continued daily election into the present, not to say one word. So when a book like yours comes out and many people are keen to read it, I don't want to be accused by my opponents of obsession or being backward looking or any of that kind of stuff. But I feel those two events over the last decade, and I think I represent a constituency of people that agree with me. We don't have answers to either of those two things fully. Like, how is Benedict XVI? Yeah. And look at the borderline abuses or outright abuses of the guy that replaced him. Am I off base? Because everyone seems to have just moved past it, and to me, they're purloined letters that I keep my gazes fixed on the mantle.
You mean those issues really haven't been dealt with, you think, before? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I think the trouble is these issues, and there's so much like this in the Vatican that it's a bit like studying the Kremlin. It always has been, and it's very difficult to get to the real truth about this, because there is quite a lot of secrecy and a lot of things that are kept behind closed doors, and so unless people are willing to come forward, often you're not going to actually get to know the true facts. And I think probably though with Benedict, once he gives his spiritual testament, after he dies, we might get some more information on what really happened and why he resigned. But of course, every time we question Archbishop Genswein or anyone close to Benedict, why did he resign? They always say, well, he's already said, he's given all the reasons that he means, and there's nothing more to say. And in a way, perhaps we should just take them at their word. I mean, because that's what they frequently say, and also that also sort of ventures into his resignation and whether he truly resigned and all of that. So I think that's basically what we have to accept right now, and then see if he might say something in his spiritual testament. I think that's probably the greatest hope of getting more light shed on what really happened there.
Have you spoken to, I'm sure it would all be offline and off record, but with regard to the two of the four surviving dubia cardinals, have you spoken to them about their expectations in regard to the topic of your book, the 19 most papabile cardinal candidates?
No, but I know that they're very interested in it. They like the idea, and like many cardinals, they really want to know more about their brother cardinals, because they just don't know who they are, and they've never met them often, and they think this could be, or they hope it'll be a real service to them and to their brother cardinals. So yeah, they welcome it, and I don't know any cardinals who have not welcomed it. Not that I've heard many reactions yet, but they're all they will all have a copy, I think. So yeah.
The next Pope, yeah, I haven't gotten all the way through it, but an important book to be sure. You say repeatedly, that certain topics by certain cardinal candidates have been assiduously avoided, and we know the topics and we know why they'd be assiduously avoided: abortion, contraception, homosexualism. Do you think And I know it depends on the deciding governing constituency that gains power, the voting bloc. Do you think this will work in the negative against those progressive cardinal candidates that refuse to speak on these real life issues, the real issues below the belt?
Well, this is what we think the book, this is how it will serve a purpose, a particular purpose as well. One of them is in basically showing what they really believe and how much they believe it and what sort of priorities they place on these things. And it's interesting because a lot of the cardinals who are weak on contraception, for example, and Humanae Vitae, I mean, this has been a litmus test for a long time, but it's really quite interesting how those who are weakest on it tend to have the most sort of questionable teaching, and in all sorts of ways, whether it be filter out into the position on abortion or same-sex marriage or women deacons, even, you know, the whole gamut, really, it comes into play. And so yeah, we're hoping that will be will give sort of good benchmarks on whether, you know, exactly what they believe and whether they have what it takes to be Pope. And but we're not doing it from a conservative position, because we really want to just lay it out there. And so it leaves the reader to make up their own mind. And if, you know, what they can find, you know, what does this cardinal believe on migration and religious freedom, for example, and from that they can get a good idea of really where they stand on all kinds of issues.
So it's a bellwether of sorts, and it makes sense to me.
Yeah, that's right. So but we don't give a sort of conservative angle. Some have said, oh, it comes from a conservative position. Well, we put in issues which are of concern to many people, naturally, but whether they're in tune with the magisterium or not, that's really what you get to see.
That's interesting. Yeah, I knew going into this you wouldn't want to render your analysis subjective. You didn't want to say, hey, this is my guy. You know, the Vegas odds are high on this guy right now. Bet this papabile.
Right.
So yeah, I didn't want to ask you too many questions in that trajectory, but the basic idea for my viewers, The Next Pope by Edward Pentin, is the 19 most likely guys. It would be highly likely, if we took like a standard deviation, that one of the popes, that it's possible the Pope could be selected from someone outside this circle. But you did your research as a way of closing. Just give us research methodology into your own mind as you wrote it. How did you land on these 19 guys to research?
Right. Well, I should say that I came to this later on in the project. It was already started when I came on board, and actually a lot of the cardinals had already been researched and chosen. So although I agreed with them, they were mostly done by others, and the research has been done by a lot of very good scholarly, committed faithful who looked into them. And so yeah, that's really the background, and that's why I sort of put them all together and filled in a few gaps as well. But it's but yeah, that's the aim. That's the essence of it. Yeah.
Well, I certainly appreciate your time. This book will be looked on late 2020, I think, as an important release. We don't know when the end of the pontificate will be for a couple reasons now. Prior to Benedict XVI, we would say we don't know when the end of any pontificate is for one reason, right? No man knows the hour of his own death. But now it's like doubly likely, and I think people are going to look at this time period as being marked starkly, not only by this book of yours, but by your work, especially in the Francis pontificate. It's a solid body of work, excellent body of work, and I'm a big admirer, and I really appreciate having you on today.
Sure. Thank you for having me on, Tim. Great to talk to you.